You're listening to Defective Detective, a podcast about your mind and body falling apart while the world falls apart, and technology and data.
The sad thing, too, is that the government's even taking a step further in some states to the point where, and I think this was New York, but don't quote me, that if your kid wasn't physically in the school, they would send officers to do like wellness checks for parents who had taken kids out of school due to COVID.
Think about why that is.
Yeah.
It's because of the school to prison pipeline.
Yeah. So they're even going that far. And it's also happening on universities too. I've seen a lot of students who are still trying to attend university, and they're going around lugging an air purifier on a rig and taking it class to class, and just because people can't wear a mask. It's pretty ridiculous the amount that people will go to say that it's personal freedom when it's like, I'm doing this to protect me and you. I don't want you to get sick. I don't want anyone to get sick. Even if we're on different sides of the divide, I don't want anyone to get sick.
Exactly.
Especially disabled people know this best because we are sick and we know what it's like.
And we're not sharing.
Yeah, seriously, get your own. But honestly, though, it's also a great experience, but it's hard to be sick all the time. And it's a big responsibility and it's a lot of pressure on a person.
I don't want anybody to go through it.
Yeah, I just don't want anyone to go through it, especially children. So, which it's unfortunately looking like numbers are very much climbing among kids.
Yeah.
And kids should just be able to be kids and have fun and play.
And what makes me upset about that is that they don't really understand, depending on their age.
Yeah.
They don't know why am I wearing a mask one day and not the next? I think I told you there was a little boy from my building who was standing by the elevator, and he was like, "Hey, are you gonna take you can take the elevator. I'm not getting on it." And I was like, "No, I actually can't take the elevator. I have to take the stairs because nobody wears masks in the elevator." And then he just looked at me, and I was like, what should I say? Because immunocompromised is a giant, he was probably like 5. That's just a giant word. Okay, we have to shorten immunocompromised to something. It's just too many fucking syllables. Why the fuck do incels get a 2-syllable short, clever word combination? And we're lugging around medically vulnerable and immunocompromised. It's just too much. And it's not enough to just say disabled, because not all disabilities make you higher risk. It's just confusing. I am classified as immunocompromised by the CDC, but you are not. And we both have autoimmunes. And it's just blah.
Yes, it's very confusing. This brings up something interesting, though. A tangent that I won't try to get too far into.
You can rabbit hole as much as you want.
Darling. I feel that you bring up a good point about children, because I mentioned before that, and I think you saw it too or started to watch it, that the Mr. Rogers documentary on Netflix.
Oh yeah, I wasn't paying very much attention to it though. I was doing art at the same time.
It's quite good. I love Mr. Rogers. I'm a big fan of PBS in general. There was a very interesting moment during his career that the show was on that I think is a good example. If the show was still around, we could do this with COVID. When the show was running, there was the assassination of JFK.
Okay, yeah, I'm remembering this.
People were just in utter shock and horrified, going through all these stages of grief and disbelief and all of that. Children don't understand why their caregivers are crying or why people are upset. They don't understand. There was a part on the show where one of the producers or writers was talking to Mr. Rogers about, should we address this? I feel like we should address this with kids, because that's what the show was really about, was addressing a lot of these important parts of our lives that are kind of difficult to explain. He said, yeah, but I want to do an entire week on it. It really came down to explaining to children the JFK assassination in a way that they could understand it without being afraid, and understanding what death is, and really heavy topics for kids and for a kids show. But it was really important for him that kids understood what was going on around them in the world. I feel like if that show was still around, and if Mr. Rogers was still around, he would have definitely made a full week about COVID and about wearing masks and made a song. We would have gone to Make Believe Town. We're the king and the monarchy, and make believe obviously would be a sign of the government. I think he would have done a great job explaining to children what COVID is without it being a terrifying experience. Unfortunately, we don't have anything currently right now that I know of that can explain a situation like this to children like that show did.
Well, and it's not just kids. It's the same issue for adults to have to deal with an emotionally heavy subject. And we're supposed to be objective about it, but that's not how humans work. We're emotionally driven. We're not objective. That's just a white supremacy characteristic. Mr. Rogers' work was really important, and it would be great if we had something like that now. A big issue is that there's just so much information out there, and that gets really overwhelming for people, and they can't sort through it. And now kids are exposed. It's not just that a kid could be exposed to Mr. Rogers, it's that children now are on the internet. So even if they were exposed to a Mr. Rogers explanation of stuff, they have all of these other influences on them. There's a bunch of young boys. Now I'm not going to even remember the guy's name. But there's some alt-right guy who's like Jordan Peterson. I can't even remember his name. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know what
Andrew?
yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Something. Well, I don't know why I can't remember his name. But anyways, boys are getting radicalized into hostile sexism before they're even teenagers.
Andrew Tate is who you're talking about.
There we go, Andrew Tate. I've never watched anything of his. I've never been exposed to him. I've seen other people talk about him. But algorithms are going to feed his shit to young boys. Because that's what gets views. And that's what gets engagement.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's so important to think about data and to think about objectives. Because we've built all of these things around metrics that just fuck us up. Engagement. So user interviews are meant to be part of a process where you design a product that people really want to use. User interviews are more qualitative. You're talking to a person and you're getting their answers in words, but you're not asking them to rate something on a scale of 1 to 10, right? Places often do surveys and track every single thing that a user does in a product. And then they make decisions based on a mix of this quantified data about our behavior, whether or not that's the behavior that we want, and qualitative interviews about how we're responding to things. And one of the issues with humans is that we just make up reasons and we want other people to like us and things like that. So one part of user interviewing is meant to get around that process where you get the true motivation that a person had to do the thing that they did. So, for example, if I was user interviewing you, what the thing that I had proposed to do tonight, which if you're still up for it, I can still try to do it. I'm nervous because I've been working on products for so long and I've never done one before. Oh, and also the book that I was reading today, Deploy Empathy, was basically saying, don't do this with somebody you know really well.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, I'm doing this with someone I know really well first.
Yeah.
Because I don't care about your rules. And this is what I want to do.
It's a safe space to like try this out.
We're recording it because I want to put it on the podcast so that it exists out there. The better way to figure out what a human is going to do is to ask them what they have done. asking a person, hey, would you buy this product? Would you do X? Is a really bad idea because people don't really know what they're going to do, because most of our behavior isn't conscious, because that's how our brain conserves energy. And I just feel like this isn't well understood by other people. So most of the time we make a choice based on our intuition and based on habit and based on emotions. Then after we make that choice, we'll rationalize it. This is what's happening with COVID. You'll go to a super spreader event. And the reason why they decided to go to the event was because people have these complicated emotional needs that are mostly related to socialization, right? So people will be emotionally motivated to go to an event like Burning Man, right? So they'll justify it. Oh, I'm going to take a test before I get there or something. But they're not really thinking that through. They're just like making a choice on their emotions. A big choice, like going to Burning Man, they're probably going to think about finances and stuff. But overall, we tend to just make a lot of unconscious choices that are emotionally driven. That ends up just being socially driven by default. Then after you go, they'll be like, oh, I didn't know it was going to be a super spreader event. I didn't know is like, I'm not accountable, I'm not responsible, I'm innocent. I think that's the primary response that I've seen that has just blown my mind. That highly educated people who know to wear masks and do all these other things could be like, I didn't know it was going to be a super spreader event. How?
Or the other thing is, do require some sort of mask. Then they wear the mask, but then later on they go out socializing and eating dinner and all of this without a mask on. Then they're like, but they required masks, but you didn't wear the mask 24/7 and you sat around people drinking and eating with it off. So it's like...
Yeah, and even if they did wear the mask at all times indoors, there's still outdoor transmission.
Yeah.
So it's this complicated mix of all these different behaviors. So if you gave somebody a COVID survey before they were going to a conference where they were required to wear a mask, and it was like, will you take your mask off at all? People will be like, no, of course I won't, because they believe better of themselves than what they actually do in the moment.
Yeah.
So then, in some moments, they'll end up taking their mask off to eat or whatever other things, or because other people are doing it, or so many different reasons. Yeah. And then after the event, if you give them another survey and you were like, did you ever take your mask off? Some people will be like, no, I didn't, even if they did. Because they'll rewrite their own memory. Because our memories are not meant to be an accurate portrayal of what happened.
Yeah. They're
meant to help us predict the future. Or that person will be like, yeah, I took my mask off, but we were outdoors and we were this and we were that. And they'll have this whole list of fucking justifications. Those justifications that they came up with post-event were not happening in their head when they made that decision. We make up reasons after we do things in order to convince each other.
Yeah.
That's what the research has shown. And to me, that's fucking fascinating. So all these times where I'm like, why the fuck did I do that? Why can't I get my behavior to align with what I think I want it to be? Are just because we're not meant to know. We're meant to act on instinct. And you don't need to consciously have an objective reason for making those choices. You just need to make choices that meet your needs in any moment. We have this shifting hierarchy of needs within us. Some of those are things like hunger or having to go to the bathroom or whatever. But the most complicated needs that we have are emotional, and they're almost always related to social connection. So it's like when you understand human behavior, everything makes sense. It's still maddening. I don't know if maddening is the ableist thing to use, but I do feel like as a person with mental illness, reclaiming it...
It's very frustrating.
Yes. It's expected and frustrating at the same time. It's hard to see it in myself. I've tried to explain this to other people. The two riskiest things that I did in the last year were both for friends' birthdays. One of them, we were going to an outdoor event. We were going to go see the lights at the zoo. And so I was like, we're going to be outdoors the whole time except for when I'm in the car, and I'll wear a mask in the car. You know, like you have these plans.
Yeah.
But then the plans don't work out, because then after we did all of this, we decided to go to State Street and get hot chocolates or drinks somewhere. So I was thinking, oh, there'll probably be a coffee place that's open later and we can get stuff to go and we can drink them outside somewhere. Because it wasn't that cold.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a place like that. So I went into a bar in December. And it's like, would I have done that if I was just walking around by myself? Fucking no.
No.
And the bar was completely empty, but that doesn't matter because the people that were in it were breathing in the air earlier.
Yeah.
I'm so lucky that I didn't get COVID. And I wore a mask inside, but then I ordered a drink. And then when I drank out of it, I would take my mask off for just a second and put my mask back on right away.
Yep.
Even though going into the evening, I was like, I'm not going to be maskless indoors around anyone. In a way, I still was. It's such a level of like complicated details. So if somebody was like, Cake, did you wear a mask on this event? I would be like, yes? 80%? 90%? Do you know what I'm saying? It's so hard to even explain our own fucking behavior. The only other time was when, like, I went to a party in November for another friend's birthday. I'm not friends with either of these two people anymore because I ended the friendships with them because I didn't want to be socially influenced like this. It's just so hard. It's not peer pressure. It is a feeling of being completely left out and of having no belonging and to just want to be with your friends and to just want to be around people. And so the only way that I've figured out how to deal with that is to not have people in my life or to only talk to people who don't live here. So there's no option of ever physically seeing them, or to set a really strict boundary telling basically everyone that I'm not going to see them. Or it's to ignore people. Like I ignored the person yesterday who asked me to come meet up with them. And it's just tiring, you know? And so I feel like we desperately need tools to deal with COVID, right?
Yeah.
Am I losing you? Or are you getting too tired?
No. I'm just thinking, because in terms of myself, shocker, I don't have a lot of friends. But I kind of think about this as overload for my brain. That's how I kind of experience COVID stuff, because I'm not really around people very much at all. But the overload is very similar to like when I go out to, well, when I used to go out to like a restaurant to eat and checking my celiac all the time. It's kind of the same experience where I get overloaded. I walk in and I'm like, I'm already cataloging like, how clean is it? Like, what does the staff look like? I put in my order. What was their reaction? Did they smirk? How busy are they? I'm cataloging all of these factors to try to tabulate my risk of getting
Poison,
cross-contamination or gluten contamination, and then ending up extremely sick because, again, I have celiac disease.
Well, that's why I like to call it gluten poisoning.
Yeah, gluten poisoning, yeah.
Well, I don't think everybody knows what cross-contamination is.
So cross-contamination is, say, for instance, there's a plate and you have a sandwich on it with regular bread, and then you take that off, and there's nothing technically on the plate, and then you put my gluten-free sandwich on there, it is contaminated. So it's a molecular kind of a thing, because anything over 20 parts per million, we're talking very, very tiny, can get me extremely sick.
The way that I usually try to explain this to other people is it's like a peanut allergy, because a lot of schools completely ban peanuts because any amount of exposure to a peanut for somebody who has that allergy is going to result in anaphylaxis. Yeah. Or anaphylactic shock or whatever. And they're going to have an EpiPen. And you don't have an EpiPen reaction as far as I know.
No, I do not.
But you're still getting really sick. So.
Oh, yeah.
And
I'm sick for an extremely long period of time.
It's still the level of a peanut allergy to me. To me, that's the best way to explain it to other people if they don't know what cross-contamination is or they don't know.
Yeah. My fun way of explaining it is, since we're already in a pandemic, let's just up it to an apocalypse and say it's a zombie apocalypse. If you get zombie virus, if you eat it or get it in a cut or whatever, cut, obviously not for me, but I'm saying to that small micro level,
Yeah.
you turn into a zombie. And a lot of people are like, oh, because they understand, they've seen zombie flicks and stuff. So that's a fun way for me to explain it, and a less awkward way of explaining it. But it helps kind of break the ice.
In order for you to exist in public, even before the pandemic, because of having celiacs at a cross-contamination level, you basically have to share your medical information and diagnosis in order to eat anywhere. And not only
correct.
that, there are very few places that you can eat.
Very few. And those places, you have to be really careful who you get. I went to one place I will not name. I'd been there many times before, and they had new staff.
And staff turnover is huge now.
Yeah. And they had new staff, and I tried to explain, and her reaction was enough for me not to eat at the place. Scoffing at me, and then kind of eyebrow raises, just the kind of behavior that you get where you feel like you're not being taken seriously.
Yeah.
To the point where if I feel that way at any place, I don't care how hungry I am, I will not eat. So I didn't, and I never went back. But that's the kind of level now of cataloging things in my environment and behavior and other people. I already did that with celiac before the pandemic. And now I do it with COVID and monkeypox and all these other things that are now popping up. And it's constant cataloging. What have I touched? What has been washed? Are those people coming over here? You're on constant like high alert 24/7, just like you described before, where you're walking outside and you're trying to predict people's behaviors that you don't know.
Yeah.
Is that person going to cross the street? Are they going to finish their cigarette? And it just puts a huge strain on a person to the point where you're just tired. You're exhausted all the time.
I feel like I'm constantly on the defensive.
Yep.
Just to survive.
Always. That eventually just, it takes its toll to the point where it's like people give up or they just stop going outside. And
if I didn't have Pepper, I would not leave my apartment.
Yeah. It shouldn't be that way for anyone, but unfortunately, removing mask mandates and not improving air ventilation has done that. That's the sad thing, is we don't need an entire lockdown, not like we ever had one, but just those two things. That's it.
I mean,
it's a small ask.
I literally put that on Twitter. If everyone just wore N95 masks indoors, I would be able to see people. I'd be able to date. I'd be able to exist in the world, because if everybody wore N95 masks indoors, the rates of COVID transmission would go down, and so many more spaces and places would be accessible to me. I had to spend all this time looking for shampoo and conditioner and stuff online, because even though my co-op is 2 blocks from me, I won't go inside.
Yeah.
I have not been indoors anywhere besides your apartment, I think. I'm at my friend's house, but I was masked inside. Masked at your place most of the time, too.
Yep.
This is what I think about in terms of what a disability is. I don't like the social or medical models. So I just ditch both of them. I just think about disability as being a mismatch or a gap between what your body does and what it needs, which is dynamic, and your environment, which is also dynamic. So one of the things that I don't like, which is why I was telling you I didn't like this ADHD influencer, is I don't like it when people make it seem like nothing about a disability can ever change. I think there's a difference between recognizing that a limitation is constant, and I'm trying to say this in a really careful way because I don't really know how to think about this in the best way, but there's been things about me that I thought were ingrained ADHD, autism traits, and other stuff. And as I healed my trauma, they got better. I thought that I could never, I still have some pain, but I'm not in extreme pain all of the time. But there were definitely points in my life where I thought I would always be in pain.
Yeah.
I think there are limitations or expectations that we have based on what's happening, and that's normal. But in some cases, those things can change and or improve. In other cases, those are a static thing that you always need. You will always probably need to avoid gluten unless there is a treatment that comes out.
Yeah.
That's static for you. It's not like one day you're on a Saturday or something, you'd be fine if you ate gluten. That doesn't happen, right? It's not like therapy is going to remove your food allergy, right?
Correct.
But there are treatments and other things that can help. To me, it's that mismatch. It's that complicated fucking mismatch. And the more different environments you are in, the more combinations can happen of different shit. Being around another human being is like another environment. Because that person, whatever the fuck they do, is going to influence them. If you were around a person who dismissed your celiacs, and they might not even be the person who's making your food, they could poison you. Do you know what I'm saying? Our environment is not just this physical space that's around us. It's every single fucking human being that's around us. And that is what is broken. Because shared predictions are so important for how we function. That's why we can co-regulate each other's emotions. That's why if a crowd gets panicked, everybody gets panicked and runs. It's evolved behavior that we have, and it makes sense. Unfortunately, we're not all living in the same reality which means disabled people or anyone who's shielding or anyone who still believes that COVID is a real thing and is trying not to get it are absorbing cognitive dissonance every time you try to be in a relationship or even be physically near people who are not doing that.
Yeah. I definitely already had that with celiac, where it's popular media, unfortunately, has used it as a joke, just like nut allergy stuff and a lot of other things. Then this is absorbed by the populace, whoever watches these comedians or late night shows. It's been on a lot of different things. That's their perception of the disease. So when I am trying to gauge people around me, unfortunately, the safest way, and this also applies to COVID, the safest way for me to gauge and measure other people outside of myself is to think the absolute worst. Is to think that they've seen every single comedian and thinks that celiac is a joke and it's a hippie disease.
You can't trust people by default. That's too dangerous.
Exactly. It's to think everybody, all these people around me didn't get vaccinated because they don't believe it's real. So you automatically, by default, have to think like that in order to survive, because otherwise, as you said, it's too dangerous to think otherwise. And that's a really hard mindset to be in 24/7, to think the worst of people.
Except for you, I assume the worst in literally everyone else with their COVID choices.
Yay, me.
I have maybe like 1.5 friends that I assumed the worst a little bit less.
Yeah.
I just don't know. The problem is that gap in information between knowing whether or not someone's going to poison you with gluten or poison you with COVID.
Yeah.
That's where that fucking information overload comes from, because you can't evaluate every single it would be a project for you to call every single restaurant and find out whether or not they're, you know what I mean? It's already hard enough to find out if one restaurant will be safe enough.
Yep.
So it's so hard to figure out whether or not one person will be COVID safe. It feels like it's not even worth it to try. That person, whether or not they're COVID safe, that's not a static trait. Just like you were saying that you went back to that restaurant and then they had new people and then those people were jackasses or whatever.
Yep.
I can't assume, with the exception of you, because we're taking this really seriously, I can't assume that anybody else, that they're going to be taking the same precautions over time, because the longer that this goes on, the more likely it is that people are going to get lax. They're going to be influenced by others around them. Even if you trust that person, how are you going to trust all the people around them? That's what happened with the person that I was dating this spring. where they were letting a friend of theirs stay with them for a month. They thought that if I talked to that person, if I had a video chat with them, that I would trust them enough to still see the person that I'm dating, even though they have someone living with them that I don't know.
Yeah.
Whose behavior I don't know. At the same time, mask mandates were ending. So I was already not trusting people who'd been in my life for fucking years.
Yeah.
How do you do it? If you had somebody around you that did understand celiacs and believed all of that, but somebody else in their network, in their orbit, didn't, they're influencing them.
Yeah. You're going to run into it, and what I'm going to say is that the stakes are too high.
Yeah.
They're too high to risk getting involved. If I get gluten poisoned, I'm severely ill for the next 6 months of my life. Is this piece of sushi worth it? No, it's not. Is it worth it for me to take off my mask and go into a bar to have one cocktail, but then face infection and 1 in 3 or 1 in 5 chance that you end up with some kind of long-term condition? Is that one cocktail worth it? No, it's not. But unfortunately, people aren't even
But see, that's
thinking about that kind of behavior.
The thing that's different about that is you're thinking about your future self. You're thinking about what future Sarah is going to have to deal with if you make this decision. Most people view their future selves as a stranger. Oh, is this one drink worth it? Well, current me wants to do this, so I'm going to do it. Because I earned it, because I had a hard day at work, or blah, 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 blah. Later, when their future self has to deal with consequences, they're just expecting their future self to do that. That's why integration with your different parts and healing trauma is so important. Because if you can't do that, then you don't see the importance of your future self. I think our future selves are more real for us because of having disabilities.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a theory.
No, I agree. That's what I was going to say next. Honestly. Because you just have to...
You always have to be considering what's going to happen.
Yeah. You're navigating a world that wasn't set up for you.
Yeah.
And isn't meant to help you. So you already have to predict what's going to happen in the future to you. Or think about possible consequences or situations. That's why celiac works so great. As an example, I get invited to go out to dinner, and I'm not talking during this pandemic. I'm saying there's no pandemic. But I'm invited to go out to dinner before in the past, and it was a place that I wasn't really super familiar with. I tried to do some research beforehand, again, planning for the future. That's what I have to do. But I'm still not sure about it. I pack myself a snack bar, and then if I show up there and they don't have anything, I am prepared then and I don't go hungry. But you always have to think about the future when you're a disabled person and you're put into a situation where you're marginalized. And that restaurant's not set up to feed me as the majority of people. Mm-hmm. So I always have to be careful of certain situations like that and be prepared, because the one time I wasn't, it was not a pleasant experience and I was very hungry. So I learned from my mistake that I had to really try to predict the future and any kind of outcome that could happen in the future in order to be prepared for it.
That's kind of what I was trying to explain earlier, is that prediction pretty solidly, because celiac is static and you know that you're going to have to do that. So much of what I think is frustrating as a disabled person for my experiences is don't know. I don't know if tomorrow I'm going to wake up and I know that I'll have enough energy to take care of Pepper and probably feed myself. Yeah. I don't know how much other energy I'm going to have over that. I don't know what my emotional state is going to be like. People who can wake up every day and have these packed schedules and this plan where they know who they're going to be at any moment, it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think it's good. I don't personally think that that works for any human beings. I think it works more for some people, but I don't think it's an ideal state of being for anybody to have to sell your time for capitalism, you know?
Yeah. Well,
and I can't be on a 9 to 5. I'm not predictable.
Yeah. Well, and I have celiac that's static, yeah. But then I have fibromyalgia, which isn't. So then there's also...
I wasn't trying to say all of your disabilities were static.
Oh, no.
Was...
I'm saying because it's very interesting to have one static and one dynamic that's constantly shifting. So then I'm planning for the future with my celiac, but then I also have to take into account the present right now. How do I currently feel right now? And then balance the two. That can be incredibly hard. Take, for example, food. Like, I have many things to cook, and a lot of people who have celiac have to cook a lot because prepackaged is very expensive or gross. I can't order any takeout in my area. There's not a single place I can call. So when I have a bad fibro day, I can't cook. So what am I going to eat? You're constantly balancing for the present too. So being a disabled person, and again, these are only 2 conditions, you really have to live in the present and the future. You literally have to live in every single time frame imaginable.
Yeah.
A lot of people have more than one condition. And again, you're navigating this in a world that is not set up to help you.
Wild to think that people interpret that as wanting attention when you consider the amount of energy. If anything, I'm trying so hard to hide that stuff from other people because I know how much it stresses me out to have these 1,000 different fucking variables happening all the time. The last thing that I want to do is invite someone else into that tornado. Maybe that's internalized ableism that I need to work through. So, not to go on a huge tangent, but that's actually what my current art collection is based around, that. Nucleation invitation. It's the process of being disordered and then trying to form some sort of order. That's what nucleation is. To let go of what the outcomes would be is why it's an invitation. How do we see our internal mess and disorder? How do we allow other people to see that? Because I think that's one of the reasons why I treasure our relationship, is because you see my work when it's really messy and when nothing makes sense, because I do have ADHD and everything feels connected in my brain. You cleaned up my vomit when I threw up everywhere after my concussion.
That's true.
Tried to figure out whether or not I could get an ambulance. That's just the intense moments. But there's all these other times where I'm just like, dude, I'm a fucking mess right now. I have cockroaches.
Yeah.
But I feel like most interactions, and to me this is social media, is needing to present a certain version of yourself as an online persona.
Yeah.
In order to exist in the world. So I try to be authentic on Twitter and TikTok. There's no authenticity on Instagram. It's just not going to happen. I don't think either of us use Facebook anymore. It's just interesting because I don't want to show certain things about myself to other people. I don't want to rely on anyone. And I know that's a real problem. I know that interdependence is central to community and all of these other things. Yeah. But I just can't seem to figure it out. I can't seem to let go of the idea that I can control everything in my life and do it all on my own. I just don't even know what to do. It was hard for me, even though I knew that you would probably want to do it. It was hard for me to be like, hey, can I user interview you? Because it feels like such a big ask out of someone to take their time like that and to expect them to be open to answering any of your questions and to be doing that for free for you so that you could make this company that potentially will make money. And yet that's what all entrepreneurs, all founders, and all creative types too, you have to be able to ask other people for things. So thank you, because it allowed me to check off my help habit today. And I haven't checked that baby off for a long time.
Yeah. It's always nice to get a gold star up on there. I think it's important to also realize that our relationship, like I've said before, is very different from, I think, most relationships that people have. That we're very open on pretty much all levels. We talk about anything and everything. And we're also very open with, I don't know if weaknesses is the correct term, but with our needs, I guess, is a better term. If we're tired, if we don't have the spoons, if we don't have the mental energy or capacity at that time, we're not afraid to say that because we understand one another and we don't misinterpret that information.
Yeah.
And if we do have questions about something that we're discussing I don't hesitate to bring them up because I know that the relationship that we have, that you're not going to laugh at me when I ask a question or when I forget something or whatever. Whereas like if I did that in like a work environment with people that I don't trust or know very well, that's a real fear and that can happen. So I think having a relationship like this is really important. I wish more people had this.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Wishing more people could have this.
Yeah. And I think on the social aspect of it and the persona, again, it kind of comes back to this idea that a lot of people don't believe what they see on the media, or they believe it wholeheartedly without questioning it when they really should. It just comes down to what they want to believe and what reinforces those beliefs for them. So even if you are being 100% real on social media, there are going to be people that call you out saying that it's not real. Just like what's going on right now in the disability community with articles that have surfaced about people with disabilities faking being disabled, which is absolutely ridiculous and infuriating.
And if there was a couple of people who are out there faking, does it fucking matter? It's the same thing as sexual assault survivors. I read one article ever that I feel like convincingly the person who was in that article was faking their illness. One. Only one time I've ever seen this where they had enough details where I was like, this is probably true. And still I was a little on the fence about it. But that's so fucking rare.
Yeah.
It's like voter fraud. I think I retweeted that the other day.
Yeah, you did. It was actually a really interesting tweet. And then I retweeted it. Yay, social media for the good of the world. Yeah, I definitely liked that.
Can I try to interview you?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I'm totally fine with that.
So I have two different questions.
Okay.
And one of them is a purchase and the other one is
Wait, the first one's a what?
Okay, so I have two different questions or two different topic areas that are problems that I would like to interview you. Obviously, if you're interviewing someone, you're probably not explaining this shit to them and you're probably not interviewing your sister. And you know what? I don't care about any of that. The two different user interview books that I will recommend, which I'll make sure to put in the show notes, is Deploy Empathy, which I'm like only a quarter of the way through, so I should probably not recommend it, but I am anyways, and a lot of other people do, and The Mom Test, which is by Rob Fitzpatrick, and I've bought that book for other people too. I don't like the name of that book, The Mom Test, because it feels like there's going to be some sort of sexism involved, but the premise of the book is to even get accurate answers from your mom, even though she would want to be supportive of your ideas. It's sort of a similar concept to be doing that with my sister. Yeah, in Deploy Empathy, which I was reading today, they suggest doing this fake topic area instead of your actual problem area, which to me makes some sense, but then does that actually translate well? I think they're trying to lower the stakes, so they think it would be easier for you to ask this generic question. The generic one that they do in the book is, what was the last purchase you made of something that is new? It's not something that you regularly buy. Then they ask questions trying to get to the root of why the person made that purchase. Like I was saying earlier, we don't really know why we do things. We might think that we have reasons in advance, but there are lots of different factors happening in our psyche that lead to us making choices. So I made up 2 questions like related to COVID. The 2 questions I came up with was like, what was the last thing that you bought related to the pandemic? And then the question that I wanted to ask, because that's the problem area that I want to build for, is when was the last time you saw someone in person? So do you want to do one of those or do you want to do both?
Sure, yeah, I can do both. I'll start with the first one. It would probably be... I bought them technically at the same time from 2 different websites, but I bought rubber gloves, disposable rubber gloves, and a Lysol spray that was listed to kill monkeypox, disinfect monkeypox. So they're slightly related to COVID. They were both for monkeypox, but those were the last 2 things I bought. Should I explain in more detail why I bought them?
So this is the funny part for me. I have been reading user interviews. I've read multiple books about it. I've heard people talk about this on podcasts, and I still didn't know what to ask you next.
Oh, okay. So
I just want to explain the user interviewing things. You're supposed to like get to people's root causes, right?
Okay.
Do you see how bad I am at this? I'm opening my phone so I can look up a quote from the book.
If I was doing the interview, what I would do is I'd say, oh, okay, so why did you choose those 2 products to purchase?
Yeah.
And then that might lead to somebody saying, well, okay, for me, I looked up on a bunch of different websites what products were listed as effectively killing monkeypox on surfaces and such. And that's how I made my product decision to buy that particular Lysol spray. And then the gloves, I had read that it can stay on surfaces for quite some time, especially like cloth and things like that, soft surfaces. So that's why I made my decisions to pick those particular brands and products. So that would probably be like the next question I would ask.
Let's just stick to one product. Let's do it with the gloves. How
Okay.
often do you wear the gloves?
Anytime I leave the house. So anytime I go pick up groceries, anytime I take my garbage out, anytime I touch anything that's in a common area, I will put the gloves on.
Was there an alternative that was not gloves that you considered? Did you consider just using hand sanitizer?
No, because the research showed that hand sanitizer didn't work and that gloves were really the only option to give you the most adequate amount of protection.
And where were you getting the information about gloves working versus hand sanitizer or other things?
I got it off from Twitter in the COVID precaution community that I'm engaged in. They had multiple scientific papers having to do with how it's transmitted and older government information before the government obviously cleansed their websites and changed their propaganda. So I followed that information. Then I just started looking for gloves. Then that broke down until I didn't realize there were different thicknesses of gloves. And that mattered to a certain extent because I have longer nails.
Yeah.
So I didn't want gloves that ripped because obviously that defeats the point. So then that brought me into one level step further to find out what thickness of gloves could withstand people with long nails. So then I also had to bring that into consideration when buying gloves.
And when you were doing this, did you think there's an ideal amount of money I would spend on this? Or were you just, I want to spend the least amount of money possible?
The least amount as possible, or at least get value out of each dollar I've spent. That I felt that that was a good cost for something like that and not overpriced or what have you.
So the last time that you wore the gloves, did you feel safer?
Yes. 100% yes.
What color are the gloves?
White, opaque kind of a color.
I was expecting purple for some reason.
Oh.
All of the surgical gloves that I've seen are either purple or blue. I think they were blue at Harley. I don't know if those are considered surgical gloves.
No, I also got some blue ones from Target that are technically medical grade, and they're blue, and those are like the ones that are at Holly. But the ones that I picked up are kind of like surgical gloves. They're much thicker, and they have textured fingertips, so I can use my cell phone. Yeah, I can use my cell phone and stuff with them on. Yeah.
Then do you have to disinfect your phone? Or you're just making sure that you touch your phone before you've touched anything else with the gloves on?
Well, I disinfect everything that has left the house, pretty much. Like my keys, my car, my phone, all of that. But I wanted to make sure that I could use my phone with the gloves on if I was out, because I go to Woodman's, I have to call to say that I'm there. And if I have the gloves on and it's not reading my fingers.
Yeah.
So I had to make sure that I could use a phone while I had the gloves on. So I wouldn't have to take the gloves off and then struggle to put them back on and to use my phone.
Do you ever use a voice assistant to make calls?
No, because it doesn't understand what I'm saying because I'm from the Midwest.
Oh. I usually have an easy time with Google. Sometimes I'll be talking to other people, and one time this happened at my old job. It would just like pop up if I said something about it, and it's really awkward to be like, oh, yeah, you're listening to me all the time, aren't you?
Yeah, it's really creepy. That also freaks me out. It's another reason why I don't like the Alexas and stuff like that. It's super creepy. I don't even have my location turned on when I'm at home.
Those gloves sound really awesome.
Yeah, they're really freaking great.
After you got them and you did all this research to make sure that they're thick enough for your nails and that you could use your phone with it, did you recommend the gloves to anyone else?
Well, when I first got them, I actually had problems with them because my hands were swollen at the time and I didn't realize it. So, like, I couldn't get the gloves on.
So these are the ones that you said were too small.
Yeah, because my hands were too swollen, so I couldn't get them on. Once I got past that, and they ended up refunding me, and now I'm using them, so I feel bad about it. But
they ended up refunding you, but you're using them? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Just because at the time I couldn't get my hands into them, and I tried multiple pairs, and then the box was absolutely fucking destroyed. It was not a pleasant purchase experience, we'll just put it at that. But I ended up being able to use them. But there's been other stuff that I've left reviews for. If I've bought them on a website, I'll leave a review and I'll attach pictures if I think the pictures are crappy, because that's just the type of just person I am.
I don't think I've ever left a review.
I always do, and I've left pictures too. Especially if something is wrong, I will definitely have a super detailed message. I bought those stupid Kotex pads and they changed the materials they used, and they're awful, horrible, and I was pissed off about it. And I still had some old ones, and I actually took pictures of the new ones next to the old ones. I uploaded them and I opened them in Paint and labeled them and stuff. I go to an extreme because I want people to have information that I wasn't given. It's a big thing about me. Then I uploaded them to the Target website and was trying to get people not to buy this product because I didn't want them to be disappointed like I was.
I just find those pro-social behaviors to be interesting because if you spend a lot of energy, you're taking energy away from stuff that you might build. It's also a free service to Target or Amazon or whoever has the review system.
Yeah.
People leaving those reviews, they're basically taking that as free labor from people.
I guess, yeah, that's true. But in a way, for me, it makes me feel better about the entire experience, especially if I've had a bad experience, that I'm trying to save other people time and energy and a bad experience like what I had. Even though I am spending a bunch of energy, I feel like for me personally, it's well spent because I feel like I'm helping other people so they don't end up in the same situation that I did.
Yeah.
And especially when I'm reporting a bad product, because then I called the company and I was like, I don't want people to end up in a situation where they've bought these pads or whatever and use them and then they have an accident because they're not the same quality, you know? And I know what it's like to have that happen, and I don't want that to happen to someone else. I always get on the line when I call in, if I do call into these customer places, they're always thanking me because it's abnormal behavior for someone to go to that length to try to get the information out there and protect other people. So they're always thanking me and
part of why
refunding
you're
and
doing
doing
it
credits
is
and stuff.
because the risk is large. The risk for somebody else to have an accident because of like these pads is a high risk.
Yeah.
And that's part of what goes into researching what products to buy.
Yeah.
Is the risk that goes along with the product, right?
Yeah. Yeah, correct.
So risk of the gloves was whether or not your nails would pop a hole in the gloves, which would then defeat the purpose of the gloves.
Correct.
And the other risk was not being able to use your phone when you needed to.
Yeah.
And then the risk of the pads was that you would have an accident or a leak.
Yep.
So you're just taking into consideration what the benefits and risks of the products are.
Yep. And trying to share that information with other consumers.
Yeah. And so I'm not saying that it's a bad thing that you did that. I think it's admirable that you care about other people. But then when I asked you that question, then you gave me the root cause of it, which was that you want to help others.
Yeah.
And specifically, you want to help others avoid bad outcomes.
Correct.
So I don't remember what it says in the book. I've just been asking you questions. I didn't actually like follow whatever advice. I think that might be the problem for me, is that if I try to do a podcast and it's an outline, it feels restrictive to me. Whereas if I try to do it and it's the full script, every single word that I have to say, then okay, well, I'm just reciting a script. That's fine. I guess a lot of advice is ambiguous rules to follow. And I would just rather do whatever it is that my brain wants to do. Does that make sense? Or whatever it is that I'm interested in that moment.
Yeah, so that's why I said it'd be a good idea to have me on it. For example, earlier in our conversation, we were talking about what the fuck were we talking about? We were talking about some topic or whatever. And then you said, "Oh, I read a book on that." And then I was like, "That's great. And we can discuss that in another podcast." And you were like, "Yeah." And then we stayed on course with the current, because we were already probably on a tangent as it is. But I noticed that when we were talking about something, I was like, oh, this could make us diverge even further. So then I took action to try to at least keep it on the same tangent we were on. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you can freestyle it a lot, but then it's also understanding when's a good time to stay on the current topic and when's a time that would be good to, tangent off from it.
I think to me, it was more interesting for me to see why you would make several purchasing decisions and not just one. I wanted to know what was the last thing that you bought that was pandemic related. I actually thought it was going to be the Corsi fan box thing that you put together.
Oh, maybe.
But
I can't remember.
To me, it's interesting because it brought up multiple products. And then you could see this underlying pattern of your values as a human, which to me is more interesting. But our actions don't always align with our values.
Yeah.
The way that I think about it is that you're trying to predict what a person would do based on what they already do. That could be their values, their emotions, their identities, all this stuff. Although I don't like designing around personas that you just make up, where you make up this fake person who has all these different qualities to them, because there's just reasons. And that is a tangent that I'm sure I will talk about at some point. So can we do the other question?
Yeah, so if you want to do this question more like how you should do an interview thing where we don't talk about extra stuff and I just answer.
Yeah, but I don't think that I'm going to be like that. So that's actually trying to figure out how user interviewing will fit into a podcast format. Because when you user interview someone for a product, it's like 15 minutes and you stay really focused on this very specific thing about the person and you don't get a lot of other information.
Okay.
I don't really like that. It's productive, it's efficient, blah, whatever, right? There's all this information that comes up when people go on other people's podcasts that shows all these different user problems that they have, but it comes up through stories. We could have been on this whole podcast and I could have never asked you specifically what you purchased for the pandemic, but something else could have come up that would have led to you talking about those gloves.
Okay.
To me, either way is a fine way to surface the problems that people are having and the way that they're solving those problems, right?
Yeah.
So I don't exactly know how to do this. There's no one right way. The thing about the Indie Hackers podcast, which is the only other example that I know that does this, I guess there's VC podcasts that also only have other investors or things on it, which seems kind of similar, but they're not building software products. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So Indie Hackers, they don't do anything with the data. There have been people who have dug through like 100 indie hacker interviews to look for patterns. If you were trying to build a product that you only wanted to sell to bootstrapped founders, the Indie Hackers podcast is a great way to not only find the information about how these people are approaching problems, but to find the problems too. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't know. I would assume that we could both be on here and both interview someone, but it might be sometimes I interview them or you could interview someone without me too. I don't really care. But the people or person who is interviewing and the person who is on the show, eventually there are going to be these patterns, which is the same kind of patterns that we already see and experience and collect in our heads when we're on Twitter. Oh, this set of people have these problems, and these are ways that they've solved it, which is exactly what I was saying earlier when I was talking about the workstation thing, and you were talking about somebody that you had talked to, I think, on Twitter, that you were giving them advice about something, right? Another disabled person.
Yeah.
The process of being like, I have this problem and this is how I solved this problem. So I have the problem where sitting upright at a desk is hard for me. And I solved it by having a couch desk and a pillow office. Then I can show that solution to another person who's having that problem. When Brienne retexted that tweet, a whole bunch of people responded, these are all the ways that we solved it. That kind of skips a step in user interviewing, which is to understand the motivation behind why somebody wanted to solve that problem. But that's because we already understand why we'd want to solve that problem, because we have the same problems because we're all disabled.
Yeah.
So in most user interviewing situations, the person who is doing the user interview might not have that problem, so they don't understand.
Yeah.
It's kind of like an advantage, but it's also a disadvantage to have similar problems, because you could overweight your own experience and think, oh, I understand this problem so well because I have it. But in other ways, you really can design better solutions and more innovative things because you have that problem and you can try them on yourself. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if you were wanting to make a product for people that helped people with celiacs, right? You might have a bunch of different ideas already because you have celiacs. Let's say you're trying to solve the problem of how people with celiacs date. That's your problem area, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And if you were going to interview someone, because this is related to my second question, funnily enough, is that when you interviewed that person, the thing that you would start with would be like, when was the last time you went on a date? How did you figure out how that person was going to be safe enough? What are the other things that you've tried? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I feel like if you were doing that interviewing thing, you wouldn't have to get to the emotions that people have around this or to understand why they're doing it, because you already get it because you have celiacs, right?
Yeah.
A big reason why user interviewing works, that they're trying to figure out values and emotions and things like that, is because that's more predictive of a person's behavior than what they think they'll do, right? But
Yep.
it's also tied to marketing. Because if you can learn the way that other people explain their problems, the problem that you're trying to suggest a solution for, you can use their language to explain the problem. In some ways, that's good, because then it's a better filter on the people that you want to attract to your company or to your product. In another way, it's bad, because I feel it can often get into emotionally manipulative territory. There's a book that Seth Godin wrote on it called This Is Marketing, I think. He talks a lot about what permission marketing. I don't have to write this story about how hard it is to be disabled. The thing that would be suggested to me is to use my story about how I've improved my health. So I would tell this really dark intro. You've got all these problems. You're chronically ill. Everything sucks. Being disabled is so fucking hard, right?
Yeah.
Because you're selling the person's own problem to them so that you can sell them a solution.
Yeah.
And then 2 minutes later, I'd be like, and then I did X. And then my life was perfect. And I was super healthy. And all of these good things
British.
happened. Yeah. And but that is how most marketing is. And I have talked about it on this podcast before and have written about it and things like that, that I don't want to have a fucking narrative like that. I can't do it. It is so complicated to be disabled and chronically ill that I refuse to sell a clean narrative like that. And that's why I don't like that ADHD influencer dude.
Yeah.
Because he sells ADHD to people as though they are permanently fucking broken.
Yeah.
And then misinterprets research to support how broken they are. Even when the research article that he cited, the findings from that research article, there was 2 or 3 different ways that they recommended that ADHD people could improve on the issue that was put forward. And he skipped all of it.
Yeah.
He just completely ignored that and was like, ADHD people can't follow through on our intentions. That is bullshit. It's not true. So that's part of why I kind of want to do user interviewing a little different, because I don't feel like I'm entitled to people's full reasonings for why they do the things that they do, right?
Yeah. You just have to ask open-ended questions.
Well, open-ended, and they have to be focused on the actions that people have taken. Those two.
Yeah, you're kind of going into this not knowing what you really want to talk about is what it sounds like. I'd just be like, I'm throwing a question out there, but what's an experience that you've had that you'd like to share with others that you feel that doesn't get enough attention or that you would like to explain or talk about?
Yeah.
So you already know that they're going to bring up something that's important to them and their situation and what they go through, and then talk about their experience. And then as you listen to what they have to say about it, you start to look for trends or things that happen that you can then elaborate on.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the interviews that I've seen on Twitch where a show will bring on like a guest or something.
I think the interviewing tends to go both ways, and the interviewer in more casual circumstances usually shares things about themselves, so that you're not just getting information from the other person, but you're also connecting to them. That doesn't happen in user interviews. It would happen for Cortland interviewing somebody on the Indie Hackers podcast. Cortland's also Bootstrap founder, right? But for user interviewers who work at a company, you're not supposed to say anything about who you are and what you think and what you've been through. It's like the therapy model where you don't share anything about yourself and only the other person shares, which I feel has its uses, but it feels kind of sterile to me.
Yeah, that's definitely not how therapy works with me.
I do learn things about my therapist, but the focus is supposed to be on the client.
Yeah, it definitely is. Maybe a good therapist has this way of understanding when someone's talking about something and they're looking for, if they're on the right way, they're more sharing the thing just for reassurance purposes. Like my COVID stuff, I talk about it and therapy. And I'm like, yeah, people just can't wear a mask. It's me just like, making a statement. And she's like, yeah, I don't understand it either. I don't know, like a reassurance statement, I guess.
Well, that, what you just mentioned, is loosely attunement. Attunement is more about emotional mirroring, but it's sort of something between attunement and validation. She's validating your experience.
Yeah.
So you could do user interviewing and be validating the user's experience with that problem, which is helpful and perceived as empathetic, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of complicated what I'm trying to explain. But I think that there is a way to do it where problems naturally come up and there will be patterns around that problem. And then those small snippets of parts of the interview where that came up can be identified and then grouped together. And the reason why you only focus on the problems is because people don't usually know what the best solution to their problems is, because we have a limited amount of resources in our space. And that's really what the entrepreneur is trying to do, is to understand the person's problem so well that they can make the best solution. Whereas a lot of times what people do in user interviews or when they're really early on in a business is they'll just go around and pitch people their idea. So you're always starting from the idea standpoint, which means other people, when they hear your idea, they'll just be supportive. Oh yeah, that sounds really cool. I can totally see that. And maybe they don't actually understand the idea that you're pitching, but you get all this positive feedback, which will basically lead you in the wrong direction because people aren't actually telling you that they'd use your product. Even if they said that they would want to use a product like that, it doesn't mean that they actually would, which is part of why I have this idea of what the nudges ecosystem is, of these huge problem patterns and these big areas of product potential. But I do not have, besides COVID cards, I do not have a very specific view of what those things would be. I just have a bunch of different potentials within a product space in my brain. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If we had somebody on who is celiac and we had identified that one of the problem areas that we want to explore is disabled people dating, I think that's huge.
Yeah.
That's a big part of wanting to do these cards. So if I got a chance to interview somebody who has celiac or other kinds of cross-contamination issues or food issues, that's just a giant part of dating, right? And making friends and any kind of socialization. So if you were to make a nudge card, you could put your information on there in a way that would help people understand what it is that they actually have to do, instead of a way where you have to educate a person every time. So then you have this shorthand. This is also like service dog cards. Whenever you buy a service dog vest or anything online, they send you this stack of cards that just have the ADA laws on them, so that when people question you out in public about whether or not you should actually have a service dog and what the fuck does your dog do and are you actually disabled and what's wrong with you, they can just give them one of those cards.
You can buy travel ones for celiacs. If you go to a different country, they're in a different language. And saying, like, I have celiac and I need blah, 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 and whatever. And they're little plasticized cards. And I did that too. I typed out cards for my orders when I went out to eat at places because I always ordered the same thing. So I had like a blurb on the top of it about it. And I had my order. And I would just give it to the waiter, and the waiter could give it to the people in the kitchen.
And so that, in a way, that's like a nudgy right there.
Yeah.
You nudged all of those people to do the thing that you needed them to do in order to keep you safe.
And it worked super well because people actually took it seriously then. They were like, oh, it's a laminated card. It's not just some rando fucking person being a dick. And then it also had on there too, like...
No, go ahead.
It also had on there too, thank you, and feel free if you think that if my food's been contaminated, you can throw it out. I don't mind the wait. So I had disclaimers on there so that they didn't feel any pressure to get my order out right away or to feed me food that might possibly be contaminated, because that is also lost in translation when you're talking to the wait staff and then talking to the people in the kitchen. So they loved those cards. I had them for 3 different places, and the people in the kitchen loved it because they could see exactly what was going on, and they had like a visual reminder of it. So, I mean, they love those freaking cards.
Now, here's the thing. We were already talking about what it was like for you to have celiacs and cross-contamination earlier, right?
Yeah.
And the cards did not come up.
Yeah.
So sometimes when you're trying to solve a problem and you're user interviewing someone, that person might be doing something that's really similar to your idea, and you might not end up discovering that. If I would have user interviewed you, when was the last time you went out to eat? It was probably when brother was here in 2021.
Yeah.
We ate outdoors.
Yeah.
I think that
Definitely.
was maybe the last time I was somewhere for eating. But if I asked you about the last time that you did something, which is usually what the user interviews are geared around, you probably wouldn't have told me about the cards, because you didn't give a card when we went out to eat.
Nope.
When brother was here. So I wouldn't have found out about that, even though that card idea is exactly the digital thing that I want to build. People could get those printed, and I didn't even think about the fact that people would want to get those printed
Oh, yeah.
until you told me this, because I never knew that you had done that. And so that's why I think it's kind of bullshit to say that you shouldn't interview somebody that you know really well. Because of course I would want to interview you knowing you really well, because it went the same direction. I understand why a company needs to interview people that are random, that they don't know anything about. I get it. I just want to do things in a more personal way, more neurodivergent way, and in a way that is transparent. So I'm sharing the results of everything I figure out with other people. Like, you just shared that with me. If I didn't already have the idea to make cards like this, that's your idea that you came up with to do that, right? Users are providing these ideas of innovation that end up making companies a bunch of money, but they're never compensated for it. And I don't like that. I think there should be some way that users can be profiting off the company, which is why I've told you that the business model that I want to do is something where people are making money on the site, and it's seen by just skimming off the top. Because I think that's the most friendly business model. It's better than SaaS. I'm not going to charge disabled people $10 a month to access this.
Yeah.
You know? I think that it's reasonable that if somebody wanted to make these cards and have them printed, that would be something that they would pay for.
Yeah.
You know, but I didn't even think about that as an option, because it's not an option for me, because I've never been in a circumstance where I would have handed somebody a card.
Yeah.
Yet I did that when I had a service dog.
Yeah. I saw the idea from like a gluten-free travel website where it's if you went to a different country and weren't a native speaker, how are you going to tell them about your diet?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's great. And then I realized every time I was going to a restaurant, I just kept ordering the same fucking thing.
That's an overlapping problem space. It's food allergies while traveling.
Yeah.
That's what makes user interviewing so complicated, is because you can accidentally end up talking about a different or related problem and not sure whether or not it applies to the same solution. So, yeah, this was super productive for me, dude.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad.